gotta go. I'm going on a quest.
Hey, how are ya?
Hello, Canada.
You like the dunk tank?
Walk over glass. Hey, rep, kiss my
We messed up. Things got out of hand. Drake's is in bad shape.
Don't take my gold away.
You wearing your rubber boots tonight?
Hey gang, this is a pretty clean podcast, but once in a while the language isn't perfect, so discretion is advised. Hit it, Lester.
Hey, Jay Baruchel. Thank you for joining us as you sell Goon 2. We really mean it. Not just because Duthie and the panel are in the film. I wish I was too, but I'm not.
And here he is, Jay Baruchel, the first live guest on the podcast. We've had people on the phone before.
Oh, wow.
You're the first guy who was geographically able and nice enough to actually be sitting in this crappy little room we
So
have.
you mean to tell me I'm the first guy that gets to experience the luxury of this recording studio?
It is quite something, isn't it?
Oh, my gosh.
It's your first experience with... No, you've been up at TSN because we filmed the thing
We did
here,
indeed,
but,
yes.
It's a wonderful place, but not a very impressive facility, would be my best way to describe it.
I would say that applies to this room specifically, definitely.
Well, it's got a little
the
air
world's
conditioner
biggest
in the walls.
Mitsubishi fucking air conditioner thing that I've ever seen, and we are surrounded 360 by a bulletin board, it looks like.
Yes, but it's good to put up sticky notes and
That's
things.
exactly right, and all it's being used for is Skype info.
Yes.
And if you want to make some inter-building conference calls, here's the 7-step guide to calling someone upstairs.
See, it's fantastic here. I just think it's great to have two actors get together to be able to share the nuances of their craft.
That's exactly
Two
right.
film actors like this.
Let's just talk shop.
Yeah, it's
Let's
like
get
the
into
actor
it.
studio where we can go back and forth.
That's right.
I jest because Jay was kind enough to give me a very small role in Goon 2, which is fantastic for me because I will lie about it in conversations with people.
Yeah, it's not even that small. I mean, you were paid like it was a cameo, but we've made you the fulcrum of our exposition. You know, you and DJ are effectively the Greek chorus in our movie. So we rely on you a fair bit. You're in the movie at every act break.
Well, we kind of appear always in the background on the big screens, which is
you do indeed,
which is very cool.
Yeah.
And I should actually explain how this kind of happened because I think it says a lot about you that my memory is always shady on these things. So you correct me if I'm wrong or if you had it different. But I think I ran into you at a party or an award show many years ago, maybe when you were being celebrated for Goon.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I passed you on the red carpet and said hello and said, hey, you should put the panel in Goon 2. And I was just kind of being an ass, as I always am, and joking.
Yeah.
And then I saw you, I don't know, a year later or something, and you said, hey, I wrote the panel into Goon 2.
Yes, I did indeed. Yeah, that's right. Well, listen, the reason that we're the guys that make these movies is because we watch TSN as much as we do. Like it's one of the cool things that people always said when they watched the first flick was that they could tell, or at least it had the stink of truth to it. It felt like it was made by people that like the game and watch the game and understand what's interesting and funny and compelling about it. And so part of that is having TSN on in your house for 24 hours a day. Like, I remember being in Manhattan shooting a movie. It's not a beloved movie, but I have a soft spot for it called The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and I was there for half a year, and part of that was Free Agency Day, and I remember tweeting at the panel a picture of my apartment in Manhattan. It was a Canadian flag draped over my bedroom door, and I had like a half a Domino's pie in front of me, and I just said to TSN, watching Free Agency Day in my apartment in Manhattan is sovereign Canadian soil. Free Agency Day and the trade deadline were like two of the bigger days in my life from the bulk of my adult life, which speaks volumes about what's going on in my life. But it was like if we got the chance to have you guys involved, it was something we left at. And then it occurred to us that not only is it kind of a cool homage to true hockey culture, it also helped us in a cool storytelling technique. We watched, when you watch all the great Paul Verhoeven movies like Starship Troopers or RoboCop, they do a real cool thing of sneaking info and sneaking storytelling exposition in through these little news broadcasts. Right, and so those movies always open in a TV show, and it sets up the world, so you right away know what the world is like, what its value system is, what's at stake, and they tread that, they sow that throughout the movie. And so we were like, well, that's a kind of a cool thing to do. Plus, we could probably have some fun with it. And I just knew that you would be a perfect foil to whoever we put beside you. and so it ended up being you and TJ Miller. Which was,
it was a ton of fun for me. And we shot it in one day in the TSN studios. And you were very wise to have me play a character called James Duthie, who was a sportscaster on a show called Sports Desk.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was a real reach for me. It's the only thing I could have pulled off. Although you had some there was another name for me originally.
Yes, and when we Michael Leroy.
Michael Leroy.
Yes.
Now at one point, I know studios get involved in stuff where I just know you're a friend, so you probably fought for me because they probably wanted to kick my ass out and have Seth Rogen play the host or something.
To be honest, it was quite the opposite. It was us conservatively estimating that we couldn't get any of you guys.
Oh, come on.
So rather than be so arrogant as to write a character, James Duthie, and what happens, because by the way, if we don't get James Duthie and we send it to I don't know, Dutch or whomever, and he gets the script and it says Duthie.
Yeah, he'd be upset.
Yeah, so, but Michael Leroy's up for debate. That could be anybody.
I'm going to check into hotels under the pseudonym Michael Leroy now, even though I never need to check into hotels under pseudonyms because no one will ever call me or harass me at a hotel.
Oh, horseshit. Horseshit. You're telling me you go to Portage La Prairie? There's not a lineup
no,
around the block?
No, it really isn't.
When's the last time you were in Portage La Prairie?
I don't think I've ever been in Portage La Prairie. I've been a lot of places, but I've never been to that town. Have you?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah?
We shot almost every hockey sequence in the first Goon in Portage La Prairie.
Really?
Yeah.
And the second one, you shot most of them in Barrie, right near my home in Aurora.
That's right, yeah. Right. Portage, the only town I've been through, it doesn't have a sidewalk. It has the fucking highway that you take from Winnipeg that goes through the city. There's shit on either side of the highway. There's a mall and a bunch of motels. It was I got to experience the Canadiens. Have you ever stayed at a Canadiens?
I believe I have.
Now, that is a great time if you can. We don't get them out here. In Western Canada, you get these great lodge-style hotels with big kind of cabin rooms. This place was so trippy. It had a water slide and 4 curling rinks.
Come on.
And then the Motel 6 down the street also, or the Super 8, also had a water slide. And then we found out that there was yet a 3rd water slide. The city had no sidewalks, but 3 different water slides. And a friend of mine finally asked girl at the desk at one of the hotels, hey, how come you guys have so many water slides? And she looked at him like he was an idiot and said, because they're fucking awesome. It's yeah, you're right. It's our fault. We have the problem.
Well, every hotel should have a water slide
and at least one curling ring.
Yeah,
and so and our shooting schedule was so bizarre because we shot the first one during hockey season. So that meant that the only time rink space was available was in the arse end of the night. So we would show up at these rinks at 10 o'clock at night. We'd be having breakfast at 10 o'clock at night and shoot until lunchtime the next day. And so we would roll back to the Canadiens at 12:30, having worked a 14-hour night. Vampire, just a mess. And then we would all just sit there, less than sober, watching curling, and then all the boys would go on a water slide and call it a night. And
the water slides are 24/7 at these places?
Yeah, and so this was the mental state that the first Goon was made on. Yeah.
You see, if you'd have done the making of Goon and just shot that would have been as enjoyable.
There is some cell phone photos of some real very white Canadian actors. I can
Like would Liv Schreiber be whipping down that water slide?
It was never Liev, obviously. No, it was. But if you want to see Richard Clarkin, who plays Gord Ogilvy, if you ever wanted to see what he looks like drunkenly going down a water slide in Porters La Prairie at 9 o'clock in the morning, I have video footage of that. So lock up your daughters. It's a bit of Canadian showbiz trivia.
So it's Liev. You see, I never can do that. I always want to say Liv.
Yeah,
Liv.
I mean, I like Liv because Liv's a girl's name,
right?
And anytime that I can rob him of any semblance of masculinity, I'll try. But no, it's Liev.
All right, fair enough. No, the trickiness in shooting those things. So when you did Goon 2 and Barry, you did it in the summer, so you could have more rink time.
Yeah.
And then you add the people in the crowd afterwards.
Yeah, so that was the other thing that was very different. So it's potentially very tedious, but so when you shoot a movie that takes place at a live sporting event, one of the sort of standard features of a live sporting event is an audience.
kind of important.
Kind of important since the days of yore.
Unless you're at the World Juniors sometimes in Finland, you get those preliminary round games, and there's 4 people with a Canadian flag there.
That's exactly it. Or the first half of any period at the ACC. But barring those two things, you need an audience, and so it's very expensive and tedious to actually fill it with people, actual people. And so there is so basically there's always a production discussion. What is the most convenient and cost-effective way to fill this audience? So your choices are actually put in 3,500 extras a bunch of times throughout the day, which is just a fate worse than death, because you have to herd them, get them into their seats. You got there's 3,500 people that have to eat and drink and go to the washroom. Like these are all normal concerns that so whatever value you might get of actually having a full stadium, it's diminishing returns because you're lucky if you get 3 shots off just because of it takes an hour to get them in and out. So that's right off the bat, you don't want that one. There's what we did in the first Goon, which is something we didn't want to repeat. Whereas if you it looks great if you're not watching for it, but if you pause the first Goon during any hockey sequences, you'll see a lot of cardboard cutouts, which is that. Now that sounds hokey and lazy. That is an industry standard,
right?
Is to have cardboard cutouts populated mixed amongst extras, and
we have those on the panel sometimes.
I'm not. I don't. You can make those jokes. I can't. I don't know these guys. I know who I think you're talking about. But yeah, if you pause the first Goon, sometimes you'll just see like a 47-year-old white woman just smiling at nothing. And so we kind of thought we didn't want to repeat that if we could avoid it. We were told that, I think it was like Any Given Sunday or Friday Night Lights, their trick was inflated dolls, was blow-up dolls. Which again sounds insane, but if you think about it, like if you're not watching the crowd, you're watching the guys on the pitch or the ice, and they're usually moving. So, but anyway, so we decided the best thing for us to do was crowd replacement. So, which means digitally replace the crowd. So we shot our entire movie, every hockey sequence, with a maximum of 25 extras in an arena that holds 3,500 people.
Wow! And
so every single hockey shot when we shot it was like. Yeah, there was a massive gaping hole of nothingness in the background. And for me as a director, it was nerve-wracking because it was something I can't really control. I can choose the shots. I can write the movie. I can help the performances. I can help cut the movie. At the end of the day, I'm relying on someone else. Like, I don't have no control over the caliber of the image of these guys in the background. So I know I want it to look real, but I'm not at the effects of the visual effects company, so it's not my say. So that
when I saw the movie, it looks unbelievably real.
It looks incredible, and one of like the hardest pills to swallow about this movie is that folks VFX who did our movie, did the visual effects of our movie. There are 701 visual effects shots in Goon, the last of the Enforcers. 701 shots in our movie are visual effects shots.
Star Wars.
It really is. At that level, it really is one of those. and nobody will know it.
Does that cost a fortune, though? How do you do
It's
that
not
budget-wise?
cheap. It's not cheap,
Right.
but we always had X amount in our budget allotted for that stuff. But what's so hard for me is these guys, this company in Montreal, folks that did these amazing 701 effects for us, effect shots, and nobody will notice because they're not doing spaceships and explosions. They're doing something that's meant to look real.
And
So-
people are watching the stuff on the ice, and it's
actually,
background.
in fact, if someone notices, then they've done their job less correctly.
Right.
So it's like that thing they say about, like, you know, you should never know when someone's wearing makeup, right? Like so it's that thing, like, if folks did their job, no one will know that they're fake crowds. And it sucks to me because, like, everyone's going to look at whatever movie has a spaceship crashing into a planet. Meanwhile, this beautiful, nuanced, subtle, artistic work they did where it looks, and by the way, so what they have to do is our shots zoom in and zoom out, are moving, are handheld, are flying around. So it's not just a static shot and painting something in. They have all these other things that they had to account for. But anyway,
That shit boggles my mind how they do it.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
And those are the things. You directed this movie, you wrote this movie, you're in the movie. This is basically Dances with Wolves, except that was unintentionally comedic, and yours is funny. But you did all that stuff, and that always fascinates me. All the crap that goes with making a movie.
Yeah.
And did you get overwhelmed by it?
Yeah, constantly.
Like, what was it? Was it studio interference? Was it budget? What wore you down more than anything else?
Well, I'll say, like, and this isn't hyperbole, like, so, like, I literally take heartburn medication now that, like, I didn't need 2 years ago. Like, and it's a bunch of things. It's that there's always something, you know, and friends of mine that I really respect who have made very good films, they all said to me, it's not a sprint, it's an endurance run, it's a marathon. And, you know, and Roger Avery, who won an Oscar for co-writing Pulp Fiction and directed Killing Zoe and Rules of Attraction and a Canadian, he told me, you're going to be tricked into thinking the movie's done a bunch of times. Like,
Was that true?
Oh, yeah. When you finish shooting the movie, there's a sense of finality. When you finish cutting it, there's a sense of we reached an end. When you finish the post-production, there's a sense you've reached an end. And each of those ends contains about 200 ends within them. And so for me, the thing I think that beat me up the most was being directly connected to hundreds of issues every single day that I had control and say over about maybe half of them.
Was there ever a moment where you said, like, and I don't want to just focus on the negative because it's a fantastic movie, but where we're screwed. There's a shot we're missing, or a scene we're screwed.
Yeah, a bunch of times. A bunch of times. Like, see, I think what most people probably don't realize about any movie, even a bad one that nobody likes, is a miracle. A movie is like a really expensive project, right? Like, you know, all in what it costs to, say, put out, you know, an issue of a comic book or a record is nothing compared to all in what it costs to put a movie together. And a lot of things have to happen for a movie to get made, and most movies don't happen. So any movie that comes out
is a minor miracle.
That died at least twice on its way. And both Goons died twice on their way to becoming movies. Full On died where it was, okay, I guess this is not a thing. Get the lawyers involved. Like, you know, it got to...
What was that worst moment, though, in Goon 2 where you thought it died? Was it a budget or...
No, it's always creative shit. It's always usually like
it's
a
like,
creative
this Duthie
thing.
stuff is killing us. He's ruining the movie.
No, you were a hill to die on. I would not have...
No. You know what sorry, just an aside, because this was my first foray into this. Yeah. The thing that I had to come in and revoice my lines. Yeah. And I know that happens. I'm not an idiot. I do study film somewhat. Yeah. But I didn't know in a situation like that where I'm just on set with a microphone that you'd have to redo them. And you were telling me that like a large percentage of dialogue in a film has to be redone afterwards.
Yeah, especially, and we were quite lucky. We were not one of those movies, and that's because we had incredible sound mixers and recordists involved who gave us really top of the line sound. But the thing is, in most big Hollywood movies, especially effects-driven and action movies, the sound in production is taken as just like, we'll get whatever we can, but who gives a shit? We'll record most of it in a studio later. We're here on set to get the big explosion and the car chase and Ben Affleck on camera. Like, the sound on a big Hollywood movie, production sound is just not usually a priority. So, and if you work in film like I do, and you go to a movie, you can hear and tell it's like 60% of Hollywood movies is ADR, is post-recorded
so
dialogue.
say like Tropic Thunder or something, which you would have to go back and redo almost all your dialogue.
A fair bit of it. Fair bit of it.
Because that was hard for me, because you got the headset on and you hear a little beep and you're supposed to fill the exact 7 seconds. Yeah. You're almost lip syncing yourself, which is weird.
And we always know, like, the preference is to take production, the choice, because of the moment, the inspiration, all the different things, the indescribable things that yielded that great moment, that great bit of performance that we want to put in our movie. The choice that we always lean towards keeping production, but there are certain, like, conform requirements that broadcasters need. Like, there are certain standards, and I can make peace with something and think, yeah, you know what? Yeah, it popped. It's a bit scratchy. It's not like the fidelity isn't completely there, but the performance outweighs it. But then I will get superseded by someone that says we need to put this in movie theaters, and there are standards we have in the Western worlds.
I'm sure there's a lot of diehard Goon fans that don't want. I'm always curious about the filmmaking stuff that don't want to hear that and just want to hear about the movie, which they're going to see. What's the date it opens in theaters?
March 17th.
March 17th,
Canada.
And you're about to go on the whole.
Doing a 5 or 6 cities, and going to CFB Borden with it as well.
Well, that's very cool.
Really
no, I know it's a first world problem for Hollywood stars to do junket stuff, but I've actually always felt guilty, and I've had an opportunity to be asked to go interview on a few films, and I didn't want to, because I always feel like that's the worst thing for an actor when you have to get interviewed 200 times a day, and everybody comes in and have 3 minutes, and you have the foreign ones as well.
That's a fate worse than death.
Which is the worst?
Oh, foreign press, all day long. That's.
Jay, what is your motivation for how to train your dragon?
So much worse, because their command of English is often so piss poor that they unintentionally end up insulting you.
Like what?
Jay, you are always making these stupid boy. Why you think people like you for stupid boy? Whatever, or something, and then I get bad because I give myself, and it's a funny thing, like, most actors give themselves little games to play throughout a junket day. And so usually, this is a bit of inside baseball for you, but usually, you'll be like, okay, what's the word today? And so it'll be like cinnamon toast. And then the game is, how many times can you organically say cinnamon toast in an interview that day?
It's so funny that you say that, because we will do that on SportsCenter.
Yeah, right.
There's a famous story about Jim Van Horn, and I'll screw this up because I can't remember what the word was, but it was an impossible word. Let's say cinnamon toast, even though it wasn't that. And he had to work a word into every one of his sportscasts. And he was at the end of the show, and he couldn't get it in. And it was like the Yankees won the World Series or something, and they were on their parade. And he's like, and they turned from 5th Street onto Cinnamon Toast Avenue. Like, he just completely lied.
Just the laziest possible way to get it in there. Yeah, so the game I usually give myself is, if I'm being interviewed by more than one German, is how many references to the Third Reich can I make before they notice? And so, I remember this German kid came to interview me when I was promoting the first How to Train Your Dragon, and he came wearing the and I'm real sensitive to someone comes in with a bit they're doing, someone comes in thinking they're Jiminy Glick or whatever. I'm like, buddy, no, this is a work day for me. I've got 14 hours of this shit. I'm not suffering this. So when a guy comes in on a get-up, I'm already like, oh, fuck, here we go. So this German kid came in with a plastic Viking helmet and a fake beard glued on. And I was like, oh, boy. And he was he was really mugging. And I swear, swear to Christ, his accent, and I've heard some accents. He had the bloody Strangelove accent. He came in talking like it got up to that Pee Wee Herman timbre. And,
But was he doing a bit, or was that his thing?
See, like the costume was a bit. The accent was like, I think, fucking real. and so he's asking me these questions and I'm answering and in earnest, and it's killing me. And so finally he closes up by, so why do you think children in Germany would like this movie? And I was like, Germany specifically? And I was like, because it's very similar to Triumph of the Will. and
Which is the most famous Hitler movie for listeners who don't.
Yeah, it's the
propaganda film for Nazis.
Yeah, it's the most renowned Nazi propaganda film. It's Leni Riefenstahl's fever dream fugue-like meditation on the 1936 Olympics in Berlin.
Yes.
It's a love letter to eugenics and Aryan body worship.
It's pure Involkenreichenship.
Yeah, and I watched it. He just nodded because two things. So the Germans have obviously not made peace with the years of 1932 through 1945 about. and so they don't know a lot of these things. Like, so we know more about sort of Nazi stuff than a lot of them do because they've not expunged it, but they've tried to put less of an emphasis on it. Like, I remember backpacking through Europe with a buddy of mine who was Jewish, and he had it, we were like 18, and his mission was, and it was a sort of, there was a degree of justice and settling of accounts that his dream was to make out with a German girl at some point.
Fair.
And as a sort of some degree of gross, I suppose, revenge. I don't know what it was, but it yielded no results. And so, but at every step of the way, he was the Jew that was going to hit on a German girl. And I remember him like, so girls, you guys like the sound of music? And
that sounded Norm Macdonald-ish.
And it was always like a bit of performance art for him. And that's when we learned that they had never heard of Sound of Music, because Sound of Music isn't released in Germany.
Of course.
For obvious reasons. But this is all to say, when I told the German kid that How to Train Your Dragon was like Triumph of the Will, he nodded and said thank you.
But I'm sure you'll be proud of talking about this one. And like, I think for a lot of kids, Goon, look, it's not Slapshot, but it's the Slapshot for their generation.
Yeah, that's the thing. We grow up in the shadow of our fathers, all the guys like my age and younger, and you're raised by your dad just thinking that's the greatest movie ever, and so you're raised loving it and quoting it. But also it doesn't speak to a lot of our lives, and it's from a different world, and it's about a lot of it is a value system that doesn't mean as much to us, and also I will say, it doesn't have the most satisfying ending, that movie.
Slapshot?
Yeah.
Right.
I think the first half is awesome. I think it builds something really, really great. But I think, why are we seeing Ogie Oglethorpe only in the final moment? But anyway, so there's clearly a lot of Slapshot in Goon's DNA. We didn't set out to make our generation Slapshot. We set out to make a truthful, fun, hard as fuck movie about hockey and hockey fighting. It ended up having a lot of Slapshot in its DNA just because we were earnest and we wanted to make something truthful.
That sounded like a lame junket question in retrospect. I wasn't trying to ask you to compare it to Slapshot.
No, we do. Everybody does.
I know,
but I had the Hanson brothers at the New York premiere of the first Goon, and I walked up to one of them after it ended. I was like, so? He's like, not as good as Slapshot, but good. I was like, thanks. And I was like, and I know... He should say that, by the way. That should be the Hanson's opinion.
Of course.
But I also, he's allowed to say that. I'm allowed to say that I think our movies are much better.
Well, I'll tell you a story. I was at my wife's niece's wedding, and her nephew, who's married, is like mid-20s, and his wife came up to me and said, "We heard online you were going to be in Goon too." And I said, "Yeah." And they said, their eyes lit up, and they said, "Goon is our favorite movie ever. We have basically memorized every line
that's so
of
awesome.
Goon." And there is this sort of Goon subculture across the country. Yeah. Junior hockey teams play it all the time on their buses, and it's one of those films. Look, it's never going to gross $100 million like some of the movies you've been in, but it goes on for years and becomes this. And I'm sure Goon 2 will be the same.
Thank you. It means a lot to a lot of people, which is like all anybody could ever ask for when you make something.
Were you worried about screwing it up with a sequel?
Big time. Like we made the first one effectively in a vacuum. Like if we made the first one and everybody hated it, well, who cares? Like what would have happened? But we made this movie that nobody was really paying attention to, and it didn't. We were all shocked but not surprised. Like, because shocked in that, like, unless you're an arrogant bastard, who are you? Why would you ever assume that everyone is going to fall in love with your thing? Mm-hmm. So we were shocked, but we weren't surprised because we all loved it, right? You know what I mean? So we made this awesome thing. We loved it. We'd hope people would fall in love with it, but you never know with that stuff. But people did, and people continue to, and time has not diminished their connection with it. It's only enforced it. And so, like, I literally have people sending me pictures of tattoos they have, of lines of dialogue of characters that I wrote and created. Like, that's fucking heavy, man.
What's the like number one quoted line that you get if you're out?
People love garbage blows in my face sometimes. People like Percocets a lot, obviously. And Jonathan Cherry, who says that line, that's one of his. That's an ad-lib of his.
How much of it? Because you did seem to go, look, in the limited time I was with you, you were changing shit with TJ and I.
Constantly.
Who, by the way, plays Chad Bailey, a washed-up hockey player and the most foul-mouthed analyst ever. And I had the hardest time not cracking up to everything he said. I don't know, I can't remember all the stuff you kept in the movie because there's a lot of it you had to leave out because he was just completely outrageous, but he was funny as hell. Yeah. But do you let guys? Do you?
Yeah, I think that, like, so I grew up working with first Judd Apatow, and then after working with Judd, I worked with Ben Stiller, and I also have spent a great deal of time working with the Trailer Park Boys. And I've had 3 great examples of a sort of process that involves improv in a big way. Now, Judd and Ben kind of came up together. Judd's first job was producing the Ben Stiller Show, which, if you're a comedy nerd, this is like one of the great sort of unheralded comedy shows, was Ben Stiller's sketch show that ran for only 1 or 2 seasons. It was him, Janine Garofalo, what's his buddy from Mr. Show, Odenkirk. It was amazing, and Judd produced it. And so, having worked with Judd and then with Ben, I could see how their processes were different riffs on the same kind of thing. So I take all of that, and for me, I believe that the script has to be as strong as it can possibly be. I got to know that, bare minimum, no matter what, if I don't have a chance to let anybody ad-lib, could the lines and the scene as written, would it play well? And if the answer is yes, that's the best way to work from something. If everyone knows what the scene is about and knows what role in the story that scene is serving, they then are equipped to riff and make up stuff that's appropriate to that scene. Because here's the thing, that's like, not every ad-lib is appropriate, right? Like, does every song need a guitar solo? And should there be a solo the whole song? No. Like, and so a lot of an ad-lib is only appropriate if it's right and it makes sense in the moment and it makes sense coming out of that specific person's mouth, and all that stuff. So I want everyone to feel free to contribute and create. Everyone on my set should know that this is their sandbox.
Who's the best ad-libber in Goon, maybe besides
I
yourself?
would say... that's a good question. I'd have to say my buddy George Chortov, who plays one of the two Russians.
Right.
That guy has ad lib skills for days. He is an utter machine for that stuff.
What do you think will be the quote from Goon 2 that?
Oh fuck!
The Peros line, George Peros.
What the fuck are we doing here? I don't know. I went to fucking Princeton.
I went to fucking Princeton. What are you asking me for?
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a good one. Yeah, I think Alicia Cuthbert's got some pretty huge ones.
And you and her go back as far as your beginning of your business, right?
I've known her since I was 15, and I'll be 35 next month in April. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was that's a neat thing to like be on set and to look on one side and there's someone I've known since I was 15. And then by the way, that applies to some of our crew as well. Like one of our dolly grips, Phil Calabakis, was a dolly grip on a show that I did when I was 14 called My Hometown.
Wow.
So when he showed up for his first day on set and I went and gave him a hug, he didn't recognize me. I was like, you don't remember? And he was like, holy fuck. So like when you grow up, and that's been kind of the coolest thing is like, I've been at it in this business long enough that I was once the like 12-year-old kid on set, and they have all kind of grown up and seen me grown up, and now we get to make movies together, and
which is really cool.
Really cool.
I don't want to go on forever here because we actually have to tape a bit.
That's right.
We're doing this podcast on the eve of trade deadline. If you're watching it a few days later. By the way, I should ask you, and I wanted to talk a lot about your Habs.
Yeah.
Where are you right now in your feeling about your Habs? You can go on a short rant if you want.
Yeah. Same as it ever was. It's complex. I call the Habs and Montreal my like abusive spouse. Like it's oftentimes I wish I was just a fan of like a normal team that like doesn't have to answer all sorts of other issues. Like, you
didn't like the PK trade, correct?
I absolutely abhor it, and I will never. It'll be a bone to pick for me for like the rest of my life.
Even if Shea Weber takes them too deep in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the two things have nothing to do with each other. Like, in fact, one of the things that I hate the most about the PK trade is that it's put Shea Weber in a Habs jersey in a negative light, which is crazy. And that's the kind of thing that I need to hammer home. Like, whenever I vent about PK Subban being traded, I'm not angry that Shea Weber is a Montreal fucking Canadian. That's huge. He's been one of the greatest hockey players, period, and a staple of Team Canada for God knows how long. Like, he's one of the all-time and like, best in the world. Like, no question, elite. But the situation that brought him to us, and what we gave up, and why we gave it up, right? Like, there has still yet to be a satisfactory answer for why we did that trade. There is hours and hours of talking head conjecture and people projecting what they think the dynamics of the locker room are, and that he's locker room poison and all this stuff. By the way, I think that's utter horseshit as far as an argument goes. Because to anybody that says PK Subban was locker room poison or too hot doggy or whatever, I say, find me a locker room in professional sports that doesn't have that guy in it.
I'm with you. I with you 100%, and I went on these rants after the trade happened. But I do think that factored in the sense that hockey is so back-asswards sometimes, and I do think there were people in that room that hated that PK, was out there on Instagram and Twitter all the time, and that he had this larger-than-life personality, and that he didn't cry after every loss, and that he was smiling.
But the thing is that that might be fair. But if that's the case, they should shut up, because he's also the guy out there when nobody's talking.
Right, that's the wrong reason. I'm saying that is the complete wrong reason. But there are hockey players like that, and that's the problem with the culture.
I think that and I think that this issue is a cousin of the issue that plagued PK in his first year and a half, 2 years, which was all that silly coded language of like he hasn't earned the right to be like that, which was like, really, what does that mean? And because I never heard any of that
with Patrick Kane or something,
or Evgeny Malkin's first goal was quite a showy goal. Eberle's first NHL goal was quite showy. Ovechkin's first couple of years were quite showy, and I never heard any of this. He hasn't earned the right to be like that yet. They only ever said it for PK. So
I think there's definitely tones of racism that crept into that.
All I can say is it's hard for me to separate it. It's they have made it a loaded, complex issue where it's not a one-for-one player trade. If it was, we wouldn't still be talking about it. Like, there's all these other political issues that go into it. And this is, for my money, in this era where every year the NHL endeavors to Vince McMahonize more our game and make it one fucking middle of the road product and kill what's distinguishing and proprietary about different hockey cultures, to have a guy that exciting that gets people out of their seats, who also had publicly time and time again declared his loyalty, career-long loyalty for that sweater. Like, people don't... I was there. I remember watching when he got drafted, and the first interview after he came down from the stage with him and Bob Gainey, and he said, "I'm here to bring the Stanley Cup back to Montreal." And, like, nobody talks like that anymore. And, like... And I lament the old hockey. I lament an era where you could have a rookie score over 100 points in his first year.
Has your passion for the Habs dwindled at all?
Not for the Habs, but for the NHL.
That's sad to me, because you grew up, this was your thing.
100%. And a lot of guys my age, I've heard echo that. And, like, you know, my favorite, the most exciting hockey every year is World Juniors, unquestionably. And I ask why. And that's because it's fast and it's action-packed and it's offensive-minded.
The studio crew.
Yeah, and because the color commentary in between during intermissions really makes it just like the greatest boxing day in the world.
That's what I first fell in love with, was the intermissions.
Was the color and commentary.
No, but I feel the same way.
But I
obviously.
just like, yeah, I also think that NHL hockey is in a strange kind of it's in a strange awkward phase right now, where it's dealing with some growing pains and it still hasn't quite leveled out. So, like, the boys are bigger than they've ever been, and they're faster than they've ever been, and they're wearing more pads than they've ever worn, but the ice is the same size that it was in 1934, you know, and it's a more defensive game, and also people are taking way more chances with cheap shotting and all this stuff, and what I hate is, like, all of the attention gets put on two guys deciding to drop the gloves and fighting each other, as opposed to someone getting run into the board. Like, I don't hear that dialogue as much as I hear the "should fighting be banned? Is there a place for it?" That's the dialogue I hate. I don't mean to do my impression of people that disagree with me like that, but I
So you don't mind fighting? I would not know that by the amount of violence in your two films.
I don't think, like, I think that there's a sort of, I don't know that you need to say violence is right, and I don't think you need to say violence is wrong. I think
there's some middle
that
ground.
it's there,
right,
and that it's a function of the human experience. Always has been, always will be. We are born in violence. Ask your mother. Was it fun giving birth? No. Like, you know, and by the way, I do think there's something to, we have somewhere to put it. And like, and it's something that Canadians don't articulate, but Americans and Scots and Englishmen that come here articulate. I've had a bunch of different people who are not from here notice this strange thing, which is Canadians are incredibly, on average, to a man and woman, pretty patient, pretty moderate, pretty, no, you go, I'm not gonna, you know, and sweet and mind your own business and tolerant and do your job. But we also have a real propensity for beating the living shit out of each other. And there's an interesting thing there in that ratio. And I remember it was my buddy, Craig Ferguson said, "No, I think you guys just have a place to put it." And by the way, I think that's a nice thing, because if you don't have a place to put it, what happens? You know, people lose their mind, and there is something old school and simple and honorable and old fashioned about what it is to be to get into a fist fight in Canada, and that when it's over, it's over. You know, and so there's a simplicity, and like
But you're going to get relentless questions on this press tour about what we know about head trauma, and well, look, this could be another hour discussion. So I don't, but you're going to get that
100%, and I can't dispute any of it, and I wouldn't want to. I think that that's important shit to know, but ultimately, at the end of the day, if somebody wants to do it and people want to watch them do it, why shouldn't they do it?
And I should say that Goon 2 wrestles with some of these.
That's exactly right, and I think that, thank you, and that's an important...
Doug Glatt is out of hockey because of injuries.
Because of that,
right.
Because of physical and mental repercussions.
And battles whether to come back in the second movie.
100%,
Right.
and it was important to us as the creators of the movie to have that dialogue. And it was equally important for us to not pass judgment one way or the other. So if you watch our movie and you don't think that people should be fighting in hockey anymore, I don't think you walk out of our movie pissed off. I think you walk out of our movie saying that's why. Mm-hmm. But I also think that if you agree that it's part and parcel of Canadian hockey culture, you walk out of our movie being that's why.
I'm going to give the ultimate compliment to your movie because I was able to go see a cast screening of it, and I brought my wife. Mm-hmm. And my wife has no idea about sports. She is completely clueless. The story I always tell is that I was at the Masters in April covering the golf tournament. I'm gone for 10 days. Yeah. And one of my buddies calls me and says, "Is James around?" And she goes, "No, he's at the Super Bowl." It's like that's when the Stanley Cup, whenever the Stanley Cup is won, she'll call and I'll call and say, "Look, I'm coming home. It's over." She goes, "Are you sure there's not one more round?" And I said, "No, Jonathan Taves is in front of me with the cup over his head." And she goes, "No, I think there's one more round." And I'm like, "There are no more rounds. I'm coming home." But anyway, so she doesn't really like hockey. She doesn't really like violence. Yep. She doesn't like dick jokes and jism jokes. Yeah. And she really enjoyed the movie.
Really? Oh, so that's awesome.
If you win her over, then you're going to be fine.
Well, that's the thing. I think. Well, that means a lot because I think we tried our best to romanticize without glorifying, mm-hmm. and they're two very different
terms. Well, we got to go soon, but I would be wrong if I wasn't like a little fangirl and ask you a bunch of really lame questions about movies, if you don't mind. Okay.
Let's do it.
So, what's your favorite role? These are quick, rapid fire. You don't have to give long answers. What are you most proud of outside the Goon movies in your career?
The Trotsky, Tropic Thunder, and the How to Train Your Dragon movies.
Okay, so I've told you this before, but my favorite is She's Out of My League, which is, I know, a nothing little rom-com, but it's one of those movies, and a bunch of my friends share this thing, that it's one of those movies that comes on those movie networks in the States that are on television, like Showtime and all that. Yeah. It's on a lot, and it's up there. There's only about a handful of movies like Shawshank and Jaws. And
that if you're flipping, you'll stay?
That I'll stay, and I always stay for that movie.
Cool.
And Puffy, who's on the podcast, he's one of my compatriots on the podcast, and he wanted me to ask you the following question, because he's kind of in love with Alice Eve, who played Molly in the movie.
Who is
he told me to ask you, what does she smell like? Is she as beautiful as we would conjure by that film?
Yeah, she smells like an English garden after a rain shower.
There was hockey in that movie, by the way. You kind of worked it in. And that's where you met TJ Miller, who's in this movie, who was fantastic. So if you haven't seen that, again, it's one of my favorites. What else did I want to ask you? Okay, this is the end. I think I've told you this story too when we went out for lunch, but at the Stanley Cup final, the entire panel went to watch This Is the End together, which is this crazy, hilarious apocalyptic movie. And so you had Aaron Ward and Bob McKenzie and Darren Drager and myself all in line in our suits, right off the set in this theater in Chicago, laughing our asses off.
That's
and
good.
we still do the stuff like the there's something I can't.
He's gesturing something untoward.
Yes, of spraying. Who is it? The guy from
it's Danny. Danny and Franco.
Danny spraying his love around the room. Bob and I still do that on occasion.
Oh, that's gross.
And just really quickly, I know that movie was supposedly, there was truisms in that. There was a lot of truisms, and you were the Canadian guy who came down. Was there a lot of, did they write the movie as to, there was truths in the characters? So you don't have to go, you can...
Yeah, I won't go in depth, but I'll say we're all playing a sort of cartoon exacerbated version of ourselves. Like Seth and Evan were quite good at seeing what's kind of funny about each of us in honesty, and then just sort of leaning into that in a big way, and then yeah, some of the dynamics are based on a true story.
Okay, that's fair enough. But that was just the stupidest movie ever. I don't do drugs, but I walked out of the movie saying, if I was high, that movie probably would have been 100 times funnier than it was.
I suspect you're right.
$1 Million Baby, Danger Barch, that's probably one of my favorite roles you ever did. With Eastwood, how crazy was that? Is he really like the one take, okay, we're out of here?
Yeah.
Did you learn anything from him?
Oh, so much. It's as stressed as I've ever been walking onto a set, because any person I've worked for throughout my career none of them are people my granddad would have known who they were if he was still alive. Like Ben Stiller is a hero of mine and someone I have a great deal of affinity for, but granddad didn't know who the fuck he was. Eastwood's Eastwood. And so when I walked on that set, I was like, okay, I really can't blow this one. Granddad's watching me. This is like this is the only guy before and since that I've ever worked for that Granddad would have been impressed by. And so I really didn't want to fuck up. And so after every take, I was doing a very quintessential actor-y thing of saying, was that okay, sir? Was that okay, sir? Mr. Eastwood, was that all right? And he kept saying, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. And I was like,
he just moves on, right?
And I'm getting stressed. I'm like, I can already picture him diplomatically whispering to his assistant, can we call a casting director and see who the other kids we liked from that read, because this kid's not working out. And Morgan Freeman sees me kind of getting nervous, and he leans over and says, if he doesn't say anything, it means he likes it. And it was a light bulb moment, not just for that set, but for my career, which is, as an actor, you constantly have this idea that you didn't get there. Oh, one more try. I can do better. I know I can do better. You can't. That there doesn't exist. If it does, well, it doesn't really matter either way, because you are not directing and editing the movie. So Eastwood got what he wanted and moved on. Am I going to be the guy to be like, no, I think I can do better than the one you liked? No. And I was like, oh, it doesn't matter how I feel. If the director got what, I'm his employee, I've served the role. If he's happy, we move on. And I have never asked for a second take since, pretty much. So and then
you asked me for 12 takes of each one of my lines. You lying bastard.
And then,
that tells me a lot. Now I know, and I'll go forward with that for the rest of my career.
Please do. How the other side lives. But the other cool thing was the vibe on his set. So I've been on set since 1995, and I've probably been on like 5 that functioned correctly. Most of them are hurry up and wait, organized chaos, blah blah blah, this, that, and the other. And they shouldn't be, and they don't have to be. Eastwood's set is a well-oiled machine. You get there never before 9 a.m., and you're never there after 6 p.m.
Wow.
Yeah. And you're never belaboring anything. You're doing a minimum of rehearsal. You're doing about an average of 3 takes, 4 if he really doesn't need something that doesn't get what he needs. And this is how you have movies finishing days early. And I asked someone on his crew, and everyone is in a great mood. And so I asked somebody, I was like, so that's a pretty great job. They're like, yeah, as long as you don't fuck up. You don't want to be the guy that disappoints Clint.
No.
And you're like, oh shit. So what happens is everyone.
Does he go Dirty Harry if that happens, or does
he doesn't need to. So
he
what
just
happens?
looks at
Everyone is in a great mood. Does not feel like a set. Everyone's just chit chat. But the minute Clint stands up, everyone stops. Everyone listens, and he just speaks like this until he just has done saying what he needs to say. Everyone, boom, leaps into action, goes hard, and then they do it. So
exactly like Bob McKenzie on the panel. And I'm not even joking, really. That's the way the Bob father works, and that's what we do.
That's the moral of the story.
Right.
If everyone does what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it, you can do things in an efficient manner and have fun the rest of the time.
Are there as many dicks in Hollywood as we think?
More.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that why you kind of want to get away from acting?
I want to get away from acting because it's never been my raison d'être. And although I respect it and it's afforded my mother and my sister and I lives we never would have otherwise had, all I've ever wanted to do is write and direct action movies and horror movies. I got into acting to be in movies, not movies to be in acting. And there's nothing about LA that is why I don't live there. I live in Canada because I like Canada. You know, like that. I think that like it's so. But that being said, there's tons of stuff about LA and the States that I don't love, and that's not like selling me on it. But it's not like I hate there. That's why I live here. It's I love here. I want to live here. And when I go down there, and I have a life there. I have some of my dearest friends and family down there. It's just not my home and has never been my home. All the other shit, like the dicks and the upwardly mobile stuff and the overly ambitious people and the not being able to trust anybody and
that's all very real.
It's horrifyingly real. It doesn't inform my decisions. It just like confirms them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we'll leave it there because I could go on for 3 hours for you, but we don't want to. I guess
this is fun as hell, man.
Well, we got to do a bit now.
Yes,
Jay
we
will
do.
be appearing. If you do happen to listen to this tonight before Trade Center, I'll give it away that Jay is making some guest appearances on Trade Center, and maybe we'll have you on another time and talk more about hockey.
Right,
but
yeah.
Good luck with the movie.
Thank
you
you
so much again for letting me be in it. Because
James, thank you for being part of it, man. It was a real huge coup. Like from
yeah,
no,
it was a great get.
It really was. I'm sincere. From when Jesse and I wrote it, we always said best case scenario we get literally James Duthie. That was always the name mentioned, and so thank you.
Well, thank you very much, buddy. That is Jay Baruchel. Please go see Goon 2, if only to watch me in a very nuanced, subtle performance as James Duthie, sportscaster.
He lights the world on fire.
All the best, Jay.
You too.
I farted on Jason's pillow as a practical joke. He farted on Jonah's thinking it was mine, and then eventually pink-eyed my pillow. Not proud of any of this.
I went out on 4 different dates with 3 girls, and that guy, I don't know what his intentions were, but like it's fine. We had a great conversation. He was just looking for a friend.
Looks like dog stuffed into ice skates, but can still bang.
Guests of James Duthie's Rubber Boots podcast receive a $10 off coupon at Young Chow's Chinese Food in Blackburn Hamlet, Ontario. Young Chow's. It doesn't exist anymore, but it's the first place I drank underage. Thanks for listening.
This is JD's podcast. JD's Rubber Boot Podcast. He's gonna sit and relax and tell you all sorts of stories. He's gonna tell you all about life and sports, and probably will play some games. And if nothing else, you know we're gonna have a laugh. This is the podcast.
Are you wearing your rubber boots tonight?